allowing us to have this very important event today with the families of those directly affected and others.
And others who've been the victims of systematic human rights violations in Tunisia. My name is Rodney Dixon. I am an international lawyer who has been assisting and acting on behalf of a number of the families of political opponents who have been detained in Tunisia for over 2 years now, and also taking up cases in relation to migrants who have been targeted in Tunisia. The two forms of violations are not distinct. They are closely interrelated in that we see the current regime in Tunisia under Kais Saied clamping down both on any freedom of expression and association, but at the same time also using the migrants issue and the fundamental underlying racism of that to seek to garner support for his regime and to distract attention away from what is happening in the prisons, with almost the entire opposition clamped down on and detained, and those who represent them also targeted, and likewise civil society who seek to take up these cases and take up the cases of African migrants as well, both the lawyers and civil society similarly targeted. So it's a consistent pattern of repression across the board, which is going on right under the noses of the EU and the UN and all of our states. It is being allowed to happen because, in our view, not enough is being done to put pressure on the current regime to fundamentally change its approach. What we have done as the legal team is seek to take whatever legal steps are available to highlight those violations and seek the changes and the remedies available. We have looked to launch applications for sanctions to be imposed on the individuals in government directly responsible for these human rights violations. Those sanctions can be imposed by the EU, they can be imposed by individual member states of the UN for serious human rights violations, to prevent people traveling, to freeze their assets, to not allow them to continue as though everything is as usual. And most importantly, to send a signal that this is not tolerated and it has to change. We have also, very importantly, launched a case at the African Court on Human and People's Rights because Tunisia is signed up. The court has in the past indicated that the government was in violation of the African Charter for the way in which it suspended the constitution and the way in which it then conducted its operations through Parliament and from the top down without any democratic input, and also in suspending the Constitutional Court, which is there to oversee violations of human rights in the country. The government has failed so far to comply with that order from the African Court. It has also failed to comply with the order we got in our case, which was to ensure that those who are detained have access to lawyers, that they are able to get proper medical attention, and very importantly, that they know what are the allegations, the case against them. These are interim measures, much like the International Court of Justice imposes such measures, which we've heard about recently in a number of cases. The African Court has the same powers to do that. Those conditions have been imposed, but there's been a failure to comply with them. We are now onto the merits stage of the case, where the court will consider whether or not there have been violations of the Charter. And we say that the evidence is overwhelming that that is certainly the case, that there are no effective domestic remedies, particularly with the Constitutional Court suspended. No way in which, even though there are some appeals going on, and you'll hear directly from family members today about that, there's no hope of getting a fair hearing. The charges are either unknown, or if they are there, they're vague terrorism charges. It's all being conducted in an environment of fear, where the judges themselves are under pressure to comply with the government line, and if they don't, they could get arrested as well. So we have sham proceedings going on, and there's no hope that the appeal is going to get any better. It's only going to get worse. So that's why we're appealing to the African Court to intervene, because there's no domestic remedy. Also, we've brought a case at the International Criminal Court, because Tunisia is a member state, and very importantly, the ICC prosecutor has on a number of occasions emphasized that in relation to migrants in Libya, there will be investigations. There are investigations going on, because Libya is a country equally affected, and we're going to hear today about the interrelationship between the two, the routes in which migrants are taken and targeted. So if it's happening in Libya, we're making a compelling case. We say that the situation in Tunisia, the linked situation, should be investigated by the ICC, and should the crimes against humanity being committed against opposition figures on a widespread and systematic scale. That matter is being considered by the ICC at the moment. They could look to open an investigation. We are saying at least make a statement about it, at least visit Tunisia as a member state. The ICC prosecutor has gone to many states before, so go to Tunisia and raise this matter. Those are the actions that we are looking to take at the legal level, but of course politically it is most important that the UN and its member states stand up to what is happening. There are many things we know on the world stage and agenda at the moment, but we have to multitask. We can't just focus on certain countries. We need to look at focusing on countries like Tunisia as well. They can't be forgotten, because other situations maybe appear more grave. It's not a competition. We as the UN need to be equally focusing resources on all needs throughout the globe. I'm going to hand over now to the families directly to talk about their cases and what they want done. We're very privileged today to be able to have a number of them present or online. And the first speaker online is Aziz Akremi. His father, Judge Akremi, a very well-known judge in Tunisia, was removed from office because he was independent and speaking out. He's been imprisoned, tortured. There are sham proceedings going on, and we're going to hear from him about where the case stands regarding his father. He will be online in a moment.
Can you hear us?
Maybe, Thierry, we can go to...
Yes, sorry, because we cannot hear you. I can hear you, but the room cannot hear you, so please, we will see how to handle that, and maybe to go to a next speaker here in a room. And okay, thank you.
Yes, let's get that sorted out while we have Kaouther Ferjani to my left. She is the daughter of one of the imprisoned former MPs from Tunisia, Yusra Ghannouchi, who has just recently received a hefty prison sentence on trumped-up charges. Thank you very much for attending today.
Thank you, everyone, for attending. So just as Rodney said, last week actually marks 2 years since my father was detained by the tyrannical regime in Tunisia. Most of the 2 years was actually pre-trial detention, even though the maximum in Tunisia was 14 months. At 70 years old, he was sentenced to 13 years in prison, which is essentially a death sentence. My father was actually added, this case that he was added to existed since 2016, and the political prisoners added to it were only added after the revolution, after the coup. And so we believe it's always been a politically motivated decision that they were put there. Like all other prisoners, he was detained under bogus charges. No evidence was given against him, not even during the court case, not even before the sentencing, which is why my father's lawyer, for the first time in his 25-year career, decided to boycott the pleading. The prison conditions that my dad has been in have been quite horrendous, especially in the first year, where he was in a cell with 160 people, or around 120 people in a cell with a maximum of 60 people, just one toilet in there. There were a lot of mentally ill and violent people in his cell, as well as receiving death sentences. The conditions in which my father is made to travel to his court cases, which are around 2.5 hours there and back, are usually in a van. If he's by himself, it'll be in a van where he can't fully stand up, he can't sit down, and he'll be handcuffed and have to hold his balance that way for 2.5 hours there and back. At 70 years old, was someone that has developed, since he's been in prison, arthritis in his knee, as well as back injuries from when he was previously in prison under the Ben Ali regime where he was tortured. It has been quite a cause for concern for us. My father's also been added to another case called the Conspiracy Against the State case, where the maximum sentence is the death penalty. What we've seen at the moment is there has been absolutely no respect to due process in Tunisia. The judiciary is no longer independent, and usually cases, including my father's case that he was sentenced in, are transferred to judges that are usually likely to play ball with the sitting Minister of Justice. My father's been a long-term human rights activist. Like I said, this isn't his first time in prison. We never thought we'd see it again at his age, but unfortunately he's here. And today we're calling for his release, as well as all other political prisoners. And we're also calling for the human rights community to basically support us in calling for their release. I just want to add one thing before I go, and it's a message from my father's lawyer, Zuhair Bilhaj Amour. He says, first and foremost, Sayyid Ferjani is not a criminal and did not commit any illegal act. His only crime was that he opposed exceptional measures taken on July 25th, 2021, the most dangerous of which was the closure of the House of People's Representative by the army. I call for an urgent appeal also to look in his health condition, which has deteriorated since he entered prison. He is now suffering from shortness of breath, heart problems, and difficulty walking. He is not allowed to have a healthy, balanced diet inside the prison, nor the necessary vaccinations at the specified time. In addition to discriminatory practices imposed on him inside the detention room with the rest of the inmates in the room, they also don't allow him to communicate with his inmates, otherwise they are subjected to punishment. So now my father has also been isolated in his cell. His status is that of a political opponent. The authority he opposes fights him with the sword of legal prosecution and the continuous opening of files against him, so that he remains imprisoned and unable to leave to exercise his rights again. The clear evidence is the arbitrary ruling against him in the Insulingo case. He's also, like I said, been added to the Conspiracy Against the State case, which the hearing starts tomorrow, and just recently they have decided that they will not be, that the hearing will be a remote hearing. It will be closed and no one will be allowed to enter. However, authorities have allowed Channel 9, which is the government's mouthpiece, to recently promote a documentary that demonizes the people involved in the case. And so we see this as a way to manufacture consent for possible harmful and severe sentences. And I just want to end. Recently, the UN has come out and called for the release of all political prisoners. Tunisia does listen. Almost immediately, 3 prisoners were released, randomly in the middle of the night, actually. And so any statements from the UN doesn't go unnoticed. And so we hope today that we will see more of the same. So thank you.
Thanks very much. That statement from the High Commissioner was one of 18 February 2025, which condemned, amongst other things, the trial that is starting tomorrow of a number of persons, over 40, in this so-called conspiracy case, where a number of them, including Dr. Father, being in custody for 2 years awaiting just the beginning of these proceedings without knowing what the charges are. Thank you very much for that. Our next speaker,
Let's try.
should we try this one, is Aziz Akremi. His father is Judge Bechir Akremi. He's also in prison. Let's see if we can get that role.
Hello, good afternoon. So, is everyone hearing me well?
Yes.
Yes, okay, so my name is Aziz Akremi. My father is Judge Bechir Akremi, who's been in prison now since 12th of February 2023. It's been more than 2 years since his imprisonment. I don't have a lot of time, so I would like to stick to certain facts. The first fact is that the president, Faisal, dismissed illegally 57 judges, including my father, and the highest court in Tunisia, who's responsible for administrative things, has nullified this decision, and my father has won the case against it. Therefore, my father should have been reinstated as a judge. Where the president fired judges and then arrested the highest judge in Tunisia at the time. And now the judge that actually signed this arrest warrant has now escaped and is claiming that all of this was done under duress. To quote Samuel Zweby, which signed the arrest warrant, he said that I have been misled and I'm trying to seek political refuge against this regime. This same judge is now fighting the case has a case against him in regards to conspiracy against the state. To talk a bit about my father, he's the judge responsible for fighting terrorism in Tunisia since 2013. He worked on the Shukri Bilaid and the Bardo and Sus terrorist attack cases. He has been very successful dismantling many terrorist cases, working with European countries, with more than 13 countries, which unfortunately had victims in these terrorist attacks, and has been praised for his immense work ethic. And Tunisia has found all terrorists involved in these attacks. To then go ahead and claim that this very same judge is now a terrorist and being accused of really insane crimes without any shred of evidence, that is completely ununderstandable. I'd like to also point out that my father is also a part of this same international community. He has participated in more than 30 international and national forums. He has been a lecturer at many of these forums when it comes to counter-terrorism. He has spoken at many universities all over Europe. This is a very well-respected counter-terrorism judge. He's a professional, and right now he has been tortured and is being thrown in prison for absolutely nothing but the control of the judiciary in Tunisia. This is a dictatorship trying to hold as showcase how absurd it all is. My father's case, one of my father's cases has had now 4 different judges on it. This is for one simple reason. Judges are so afraid to touch these cases. They can clearly see that they're empty political cases, so they don't want to tie their names to these cases, so they keep resigning from their posts and trying to dodge conviction in these cases. Judges have told lawyers in my father's case, and have told my father himself that we apologize, there's nothing we can do, these are orders from above. These are judges in Tunisia that have said this directly to esteemed lawyers in Tunisia. All of this disdain and oppression has unfortunately not been met as strongly as it should have been by the international community. I would like to quote my father's final report. Before my father's arrest, he wrote, I addressed this aid to call to all national and international organizations to intervene in order to put an end to this tragic injustice and protect me and protect Tunisia's judicial independence. All administrative and decisions are cited are available. This was my father's call for aid before his arrest, and unfortunately this went on definitely even after his torture and arrest. Today my father's cases remain void of any evidence. Some of them are moving, as I said, fast towards conviction, and the last Court of Appeal has decided to reject one of these cases and put it back into the second Court of Appeal, citing lack of evidence, which is a good sign. But considering the high number of cases, which all the cases have the same accusations, but the reason they kind of start many cases is to ensure that this person, this problem, this judge who is a threat to dictatorship dreams and a threat remains in prison for as long as possible. I try to speak on behalf of my father and ask for any national or international organization to try to visit Tunisia, visit this judge, see what's going on with their own eyes. Any lawyer, any politician, anyone who's on the ground in Tunisia can see the absurdity of it all. There's no judge that I have spoken to would even dream of calling Bechir Akremi a terrorist. There's no judge in the entirety of Tunisia that can stand before you and say, I have arrested more terrorists than Bechir Akremi. It is that ridiculous. This is the judge that worked so many terrorist cases. He has dismantled so many cells and has saved the entire region and Europe by extension from the massive threat which was terrorism in Tunisia. Tunisia's centralized location makes terrorism in a big problem for any of its neighbors. And this judge, along with many brave police units, led this massive campaign from 2013 all the way to the suspension in 2020 to dismantle terrorist cases. Today, Tunisia is free of terrorism not because of Said or anyone. It is free because of the work judges like Bechir Akremi and police units have put into Tunisia. And today, despite all of this, despite 34 years fighting this terrorism, he's being accused of being a terrorist by a dictatorship regime that is unfortunately being supported by high levels of government in Europe. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope that this very bad and dark chapter in the history of Tunisia can be turned, and I hope that I can see my father one day speak out himself and about his experiences as a free man. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aziz, for joining us today and for highlighting the sad indictment of the country when those independent judges who stood up for the rule of law are themselves attacked and removed from office and treated in this way, where you get stuck in an endless cycle. We've seen this with a number of cases of procedures in court where there are appeals and new cases started, and it's impossible to get on top of it. It's simply a way of taking people out of the equation and silencing them. Aziz's father is one of the applicants in the African court case where we have evidence on video of his ill treatment and torture, which we provided to the judges of the court. The next speaker, we're very privileged to have Yusra Ghannouchi, who is the daughter of the Speaker of the Parliament Rached Ghannouchi, who's been in custody for over 2 years. He was the leader of the parliament and the leader of the opposition as well, the Ennahdha party. He has recently been sentenced as well to 22 years imprisonment in one case. There are other cases as well. Once again, a web of litigation being used to muzzle the opposition. And also what's interesting is Ishtisal's sister and brother, who are in London, have both themselves been convicted in absentia as well, and given outrageous sentences of 35 years, 25 years, even though they weren't there at the court proceedings, and there have been orders made to freeze their assets as well. So using every available weapon to seek to undermine their position. Thank you very much for attending today.
Thank you very much, Rodney. Thank you to all of you for coming today to hear this important testimony. I think as previous speakers have shown, no one is safe from the repressive machine that this regime is building. And it's even more reprehensible what is happening in Tunisia, because this is not just a continuation of authoritarianism for many decades. This regime has dismantled a democracy in the making that was struggling very hard to protect human rights, and put in place the most progressive constitution in the Arab world that protected human rights, that put in place a national commission against torture, that put in place a national commission for human rights, that put Tunisia at the forefront of human rights protection in the region. And today, Qais Said has rolled all of those things back. But of course, there are people who are fighting against this repression, this growing repression, and those people are being persecuted across the board, across the range. There are journalists, there are anti-racism activists, there are trade unionists, there are all manner of people. There are researchers who are being put in prison, who are being accused of the most outrageous things, undermining state security, seeking to topple the state, insulting the president, all sorts of things, the usual kind of charges that you see that clearly shout trumped-up charges. I want to speak a little bit about the situation of the rule of law in Tunisia. There is no rule of law in Tunisia today. The situation is that you have court decisions that are being sent from the presidential palace and from the Minister of Justice directly to judges. Judges are being put in very difficult situations. Many of them have taken leave. They have asked to go on holiday or be removed from their jobs for a while because they are under such immense stress and emotional pressure from their employers. So they are often actually apologizing to the defendants while sentencing them. And you can see that very clearly in many of these cases. Let's talk about some of the elements or the characteristics of the judicial situation in Tunisia now. The legal cases that we see dozens of legal cases against anti-racism activists, as I mentioned, political opposition, etc. These legal cases are works of pure fiction. There is zero evidence. There is zero respect for procedure or basic minimum conditions of a fair trial, so much so that even the lawyers have given up trying to attend some of these court hearings because they know that this is nothing to do with the law. This is purely political persecution. There is the use of secret informants who, as a defendant, you don't even know what you've been accused of, what kind of evidence has been put forward. For example, these informants turn out to be, you only have a description of their profile, and some of them have been identified as convicted criminals who magically receive reduced sentences when they testify against opposition figures. Some of them are former dismissed government employees who are dismissed for committing violations, and then they are magically reinstated after they testify against political oppositions. And so you see this systematically used in these different proceedings. You have opaque proceedings where we don't even know what the alleged facts are. Some of these defendants, they have been put in preventive detention now for over 2 years, but the judges haven't even seen them. So you are saying that there is such an urgent thing for you to investigate, but you're not even interested in speaking to the defendants. And so what is happening in Tunisia is absolutely disgraceful and a violation of human rights. You have military courts being used against civilians. Just in October, Sheyma Ben Aissa, whose son was supposed to be here today, but he's actually gone to be with his mother because she's a defendant in another case tomorrow, being heard tomorrow. She was sentenced to 1 year in prison, suspended sentence in a military court for insulting the president, for saying something on social media that criticized the president. And so you have these absurdly broad charges with very heavy sentences that are being used systematically against journalists, activists, etc. At the same time, you have, as Aziz mentioned, that there is no more judicial independence. The few judges who, at the beginning, stood very openly against the regime and refused to issue arrest warrants on the basis of no evidence, 57 were dismissed from their jobs. Until now, they have been even refused the right to practice in law. They have asked to be able to practice as self-employed lawyers because they need to live. They have been rejected. Their applications have been rejected, so they have no way to actually live or provide for their families. And of course, all of those who have sought to defend human rights have met with the same fate. Today in Tunisia, I am ashamed to say that we have more journalists in prison than we did under Ben Ali. And this is not me saying this is the Committee to Protect Journalists, the CPJ, which in its most recent report said that the number of journalists behind bars in Tunisia today is the highest since it began keeping track in 1992. And so we have, as one president of a local branch of the National Union for Journalists noted, Decree 54, which is an executive decree passed, ordered by the president, which essentially allows anyone who criticizes the government on social media to be arrested and tried. Decree 54, in the words of this media union journalist, says it treats every journalist as if they are on conditional release from jail, pending investigation. And so every journalist today is keeping that in mind in the back of their head. Not just those who are already being directly harassed, but there is widespread fear across Tunisia. And in fact, all Tunisians feel that they are under conditional release under this regime. To speak very briefly about my father was the Speaker of the Parliament, which was dissolved by the President, Qais Said. He was arrested on 17th of April, 2023, in front of myself and my mother and my children. And today he is on day 678 of his imprisonment. He faces charges in 13 different legal cases. Most of the charges we don't understand, the evidence we haven't seen. At 83 years old, he is the oldest political prisoner in the Arab world. Not an accolade that you really want to have. And probably the oldest in the world. We are not sure. We don't have the data on that. His health has deteriorated because of the conditions in prison and the prolonged detention. And at his age, with his health, continued detention obviously poses a very serious threat to his life. He has been sentenced to over 25 years in prison so far, in 3 cases, and there are obviously a lot more to go. And of course, he has been very kind to the judges who sentenced him, and he tells them that I know you are not responsible for this. At the end of the day, it is the executive, it is the president who is responsible for this, for giving these orders. And he knows that this is political. This is not a legal battle. This is a political battle. And so my father is one of many. Kaouther's father is also one of 130 MPs who were prosecuted for defending the Constitution, for essentially saying that what the president did was unconstitutional, of tearing up the Constitution, dissolving the government, dissolving the parliament, etc. And so he and they are paying the price for defending a democratic constitution that Tunisians fought very hard for many decades. Final thoughts. I just wanted to say that it's important to mention that it's critical for the international community to speak out about what's happening in Tunisia. As Kaouther said, statements by the UN Commissioner for Human Rights, by member states, these are important. At the end of the day, we have seen results come when prominent figures in the international community, when human rights organizations asked to come and visit prisoners. We have seen improvements in prison conditions when the OHCHR office in Tunisia went to visit prisoners. And so it's very important to have more public statements. Member states' embassies in Tunisia can also attend hearings. These things are very important to bear witness to what is happening, to make the regime know that there are people who are watching. And this does have life-changing results for the prisoners who are suffering at the moment. So we urge all of you who work for member states, who work for human rights organizations, to organize delegations to Tunisia, to make public statements, and to make sure that these human rights standards, which are at the end obligations that the Tunisian state signed up to, regardless of what Qais Said likes to say, that these are conspiracies by the foreign agents because they are trying to take away Tunisia's national sovereignty. Tunisia signed up to the ICCPR in 1969, or ratified it in 1969. It ratified the Convention Against Torture in 1988, I believe. So these are sovereign international obligations that Tunisians and Tunisia took upon itself, and we are simply asking for these to be upheld. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that. I'm going to
turn over now to an online contribution again from a researcher from the NGO On Borders. They have brought out a report on state trafficking, the expulsion and sale of migrants from Tunisia to Libya, and have done extensive research on the migrant position in Tunisia and on the border. They are not going to be identified on screen because they don't want to compromise their ongoing research on the ground, but we're about to hear from them what they are doing and where they see this going.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me well?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you so much. The report state trafficking was written by an international group of researchers who wish to remain anonymous for their own safety, as well as to protect the individuals who share their testimonies. Alongside the investigation team, three associations have collaborated with On Borders, bringing their expertise and precedence in one of the key locations along the migratory route from the Mediterranean, Tunisia, and Libya. The research team, which began gathering information in 2023, has been working with a network of migrant correspondents in informal camps north of Sfax, a key departure point for migrants heading to Lampedusa. On Borders has also worked on geolocalizations and topological reconstruction of events, providing concrete criteria to support the testimonies with precise indications of where the crimes occurred. It consists of 30 video and audio interviews conducted over the course of 2 years with people who don't know each other, who have different migration histories and experiences, who speak different languages, and who were interviewed in various locations across Europe, Libya, and Tunisia. This has enabled to compile documentation with scientific rigor that
Thank you enormously for that message. This is precisely the evidence which we have provided to the ICC prosecutor regarding international cross-border crimes, which can be investigated because both Libya and Tunisia are within the court's jurisdiction. I'm going to hand over finally to Adil Miri, who's the Vice President of the Association of Victims of Torture, to do a few very short closing remarks, and then I'm hoping to have a little bit of time for questions because we have to finish at 4. Thank you very much.
Ok, merci beaucoup. Je vais parler en français. Donc, je préférais parler en arabe, ma langue maternelle, mais puisque les arabophones ne sont pas beaucoup, donc je prends une autre langue, c'est la deuxième langue, c'est le français. Donc, et après, Yusra va faire un petit résumé. Je vais faire vite parce que j'ai beaucoup à dire. Donc, premièrement, je remercie les organisateurs, Fondation Vida et Cap Freedom for Conscience pour ce side event. Merci pour votre invitation. Deuxièmement, je remercie aussi le Haut Commissariat aux droits de l'homme. Ils ont publié un article dernièrement, une décision concernant la situation des droits de l'homme. Vous pouvez le trouver aussi online. Et je veux parler normalement de la situation des droits de l'homme en Tunisie, la situation économique, la situation sociale et institutionnelle, mais puisque je n'ai pas le temps, je vous invite à visiter notre site internet avdtch.org. Vous allez trouver ce rapport en 3 langues, en français, en anglais et en arabe. Donc juste pour gagner le temps, Donc, je veux parler ici de notre campagne internationale pour libérer les prisonniers politiques en Tunisie, qui a commencé en parallèle avec le Conseil des droits de l'homme le 24 février. Cette campagne, c'est l'initiative de la VTT, mais nous sommes maintenant une 50aine de ONG que nous sommes en train de collaborer et travailler là-dessus pour faire connaître la situation des droits de l'homme et surtout les prisonniers politique en Tunisie. Nos objectifs, c'est faire connaître les conditions de vie officielles des prisonniers politiques et dénoncer la politique, et dénoncer la liquidation politique dont ils font l'objet. Deuxièmement, aussi faire connaître le harcèlement visant les familles de prisonniers politiques et leurs proches et faire bouger un réseau de 50 associations pour travailler là-dessus. Donc, on a commencé le 24 février pour faire connaître, on a une grande liste de prisonniers politiques. On a commencé le premier jour pour parler, et même 2 jours pour parler de président du Parlement de la période 2019-2024, M. Rached Ghannouchi. Il est âgé de 83 ans. Donc, il est condamné dernièrement de 29 années et je vous laisse analyser. Il est âgé de 83 ans, plus 29, ça veut dire autre chose. La deuxième personne, c'est Abdelhamid Jlassi aussi. Il est condamné, il est en prison. Maintenant, il a eu dernièrement le début d'un cancer, un ganglion, donc voilà. Et la suite, c'est Nourdine Bhiri, Issam Chabi, Khayam Turki et Jawhar Ben Mbarek. Aujourd'hui, c'est la 7e journée, c'est la journée de Sahbi Atik et Saïd Ferjani. Demain, il sera Ghazi Chawashi et Rida Belhaj. Pourquoi on a choisi ces à peu près 8 ou 9 personnes? Parce que demain, il y aura un procès. Demain, c'est une journée scandale en Tunisie. Demain, un procès pour ces personnes et à peu près plus ou moins de 50 personnes qui vont être jugées demain. Pourquoi? Parce qu'ils sont réunis pour discuter de la situation des droits de l'homme en Tunisie. Donc, voilà. Donc, pour tout ça, il faut suivre demain. Il y aura vraiment un procès. Il y a des avocats qui vont assister. Il y a des personnalités qui vont assister. Et c'est quoi? Pourquoi je dis c'est un scandale? Parce qu'ils vont laisser le prisonnier dans leur prison, dans une chambre, et ailleurs, donc il y aura le juge et les avocats. Donc ils ne vont pas même laisser les prisonniers qui se déplacent pour être jugés ou bien pour qu'ils s'expriment. Il y a pas mal, maintenant il y a une campagne hashtag pour dire on veut un procès en plein air, on veut voir, on veut écouter que ce soit les prisonniers, le condamné, le prisonnier ou bien aussi l'autre avis, mais le Qaïsaïd, le gouvernement ne veut pas ça. Donc, je ne veux pas trop allonger ou bien trop parler. On a 6 lettres. On n'a pas imprimé beaucoup, mais on a quelques exemplaires. On a 6 lettres de prison, les 6 lettres de Khayam Turki, Jawher Ben Mbarak, Issam Chabi et Abdelhamid Jlassi et Ghazi Shawash. Ils ont envoyé 2 lettres de leur prison à travers leur famille, à travers leur avocat. Nous, on a traduit ces lettres, ces 6 lettres, en anglais, en français et elle était en arabe, l'original. Donc ces lettres, c'est très très important. Le temps, il me presse, mais je veux donner quelques-unes et vous allez trouver ça aussi sur notre site internet. Donc je veux conclure. Je veux vous donner quelques exemples après. Ok. Donc, voilà. La dernière, l'information qui vient de venir, les choses, il y a Mohamed Jmi'i. C'est un prisonnier politique aussi. Il est en train de grève de faim maintenant. Il est sur chaise roulante. Il ne peut pas marcher. Pourquoi? Parce que juste il a demandé qu'il a besoin de ses médicaments. Ils ne veulent pas faire rentrer ces médicaments, donc il est maintenant dans une situation avec d'autres personnes. Le temps passe, donc je résume. La situation de droits de l'homme en Tunisie, elle est grave et elle nécessite que tous les ONG et toutes les personnes qui travaillent pour le droit de l'homme bougent et fassent quelque chose. Je remercie une autre fois le Haut Commissariat des droits de l'homme et aussi d'autres institutions qui sont en train de faire quelque chose et vive la Tunisie. Merci et la liberté pour tous les prisonniers politiques.
Merci à vous. Merci beaucoup d'avoir assisté à ce side event. Nous arrivons au terme de l'heure consacrée et voilà, je pense que vous avez les références qui ont été données. Si vous voulez en savoir plus, on vous souhaite une belle suite d'après-midi.